What we're going to talk about today is hard for lots of people. We don't want to hear it. We don't want to do it. And I've even heard people say to me that they won't do it. So chances are the sermon this morning might make a couple people uncomfortable. Whether you're watching here at church or watching at home, you might find yourself wiggling in your seat, dismissing what I have to say, and maybe you'll stop listening altogether. But as Jesus said, let those with ears hear. You know, the word is truth, whether we like it or not. And it's my job and my purpose to teach it to you. I didn't write it and I didn't command it, but I do preach it. Being a carpenter's apprentice isn't easy for me either. Everything that I teach you, I am also accountable to. So as we wrestle through this lesson this morning with our excuses, our justifications, our attempts to manipulate the word to make ourselves feel better, remember that if you have an issue, you're not taking that up with me. You're taking it up with him. So sit back and get comfortable being a little uncomfortable. You know, we read about Jesus on the Sabbath 20 times in the New Testament. We're told it was his regular routine to keep the Sabbath, and his followers did as well. And in our lesson today, we find him on the Sabbath with some lessons to teach to us. We're going to be in Luke 6 this morning, 1 through 11. We have two stories to read about. And in the first, we have Jesus and his disciples walking along on the Sabbath, and the religious leadership is there looking for a fight. Let's pick up at verse 1. Now it happened on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the grain fields. And his disciples plucked the heads of grain and ate them, rubbing them in their hands. And some of the Pharisees said to them, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" Here we are, Jesus and his disciples breaking more rules. You know, it's kind of like they have their own personal accountability coaches following them around, just waiting for them to make a mistake. Jesus and his disciples are under a microscope. And I want you to really picture this because the disciples are just lollygagging through the wheat. They'll grab the top and clean it in their hands and eat the seeds. But this is very casual. They're just walking along. They're not harvesting a wheat field or cooking a 7-course meal in the kitchen. They're just walking and grabbing some seeds. It would be like any of us taking a walk this afternoon and stopping along the way to grab a honeysuckle. And the Pharisees see them and make issue with it. They say, "Look at what you're doing. Why? Why are you breaking the law on the Sabbath?" Now see, to them, this is a big deal because they have such rigid rules. They've taken the Sabbath commandment and they've molded it into something that they think it should be. But in verse 3, Jesus answers them. Jesus answers them and he says, "Have you not even read this?" Now, I tell you what, I love when Jesus does this, when he uses the word on guys who teach the word. I mean, he's basically looking at them here and saying, "Guys, do you not read all of the things that you preach?" So let's break that whole verse down. He says, "Have you not even read this, what David did when he was hungry? He and those who were with him? How he went into the house of God, took and ate the showbread, and also gave some to those with him, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat." You see, the Pharisees accused the disciples of harvesting on the Sabbath, which they interpret as a violation of the law. However, Jesus defends their actions by referencing the provisions in the scripture that account for acts of mercy and acts of necessity. You see, the Sabbath is more than just sitting in a chair all day doing nothing. Jesus is saying there are moments of necessity. There are moments of mercy. And in verse 5, he says to them, "The Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath." What he's saying here is the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, which indicates his authority to interpret the law. He's also emphasizing that the Sabbath was made for humanity's benefit, not as a burden. You see, the Sabbath was made for us, to bless us, to make things easier for us. See, taking a full day off for God is not to be a burden because it comes with significant reward. It was designed for us so that we could thrive. Now we have another lesson that picks up in verse 6. Jesus is going to make some noise on the Sabbath, and he's going to do it in the synagogue. So to read that lesson, we're going to pick up at verse 6. Now it happened on another Sabbath also that he entered the synagogue and taught. And a man was there whose right hand was withered. So the scribes and Pharisees watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. There they are again, paying no attention to what's happening on the Sabbath, except to what Jesus is doing, watching, waiting, lingering, sitting with their checklist ready to pounce. But it says in verse 8, but he knew their thoughts. And Jesus said to the man who had the withered hand, arise and stand here. And he arose and stood. You see, Jesus wanted to make some noise. He was about to break the rule, but he was about to break the rule in a bold way. Verse 9, Jesus said to them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil? To save a life or to destroy? You see, Jesus poses a critical question to the Pharisees. Which is it? What should I be doing on the Sabbath, good or evil? And what he's doing here is challenging their legalistic mindset. And what he's saying is there's an importance for compassion. There's an importance for mercy over simple rule following. You know, the answer to his question is obvious. It's better to do good. It's better to save a life, to have common sense and mercy on the Sabbath. Jesus is schooling them with what they should already know. But see, it's more for us because we don't follow rigid Sabbath laws. In fact, we don't follow Sabbath laws at all, most of us. And the message here says that we are always serving one master or honoring the other, including on God's day, whether we honor God's day or not. But let's finish. Verse 10. And when he had looked around at them all, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. But they, the Pharisees, were filled with rage and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. You see, they didn't hear a word that he had to say. They are not paying any attention to what his lesson is. They do not have ears to hear. Jesus is no longer a rebel or a rule breaker. He's starting to become a problem. Something to be fixed, something to be sorted out, something to be taken care of. You know, we talked last week that Jesus was coming to change the way believers saw the law. The events in this passage reveals a significant shift in understanding that law. Jesus' actions suggest that the true intent of the law is to promote human welfare and mercy rather than strict adherence to regulations. But see, this mercy and compassion and love that we show on the Sabbath, the depth of our faith and the importance of this message, of this teaching, of this whole passage gets kind of lost when we don't follow the commandment at all. Teaching about how to add more mercy and compassion seems like icing on a cake most of us haven't even baked yet. I mean, really think about it. How many things have you already thought about while you were listening to me preach? You probably thought about what you were going to do when you left here today, what you're going to have for lunch, what you're going to watch on TV, what time you're going to have a nap, what time the ball game comes on, the errands that you have to run, the phone calls that you have to make, and everything that you have to get ready for Monday, because we all know how important Monday is. And you've thought about all sorts of things. You see, we can't even be locked in for 1 hour, much less a full day that he's asking for. And I promise that our lives are richly cheated because of it. Genesis tells us that God created the world and everything in it in 6 days. He finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day. Further, it says, God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. Exodus, Leviticus, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Deuteronomy, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, Hebrews, Revelation, all of these books in the Bible and more stress the importance of this command. Let's hear the commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your livestock or your male servant or your female servant or the sojourner who is in your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. A holy day made for us. A commandment to receive its blessing, a vital, life-giving part of being a believer that most believers couldn't care less about. You see, this is where it gets uncomfortable. If you want to find a place that the enemy has a grip on this world and maybe even in your life, this one hits for almost everybody. The word Sabbath or Sabbaths appears about 172 times in the Old and New Testament of the King James Bible. If you were going to read the Bible in a full year, you would find the Sabbath almost 3 times a week. Makes it pretty important, don't you think? And if you're already ahead of me saying things like this doesn't count for us anymore, this was under the old law, well, I'm here to tell you that's not what the word says. Furthermore, why in the world would Jesus, through his entire ministry, honor the Sabbath day? Why do we find him keeping the Sabbath, encouraging his disciples to do it, if the Sabbath isn't important or necessary? You know, we saw last week that he gave up fasting for him and his disciples while he was here on earth. Well, if the Sabbath had no value, why wouldn't he have given that up too? You see, Jesus wasn't about mixed messages. He spoke it and he lived it. I mean, his death and his resurrection kept the Sabbath. Really think about that for a second. Jesus was crucified on a Friday. Everyone went home to keep the Sabbath day, and he arose on Sunday. They returned to his grave on Sunday after the Sabbath was completed. You see, the Bible teaches that the Sabbath is a holy day of rest, set apart by God for worship and reflection and renewal. See, it's meant for the benefit of humanity. A day that he blessed and sanctified, made holy for us. Doing what he asks on this day isn't just about him, it's about us. And instead, we see it as a punishment. You know, the Bible frames the Sabbath as a divine gift of grace, physical and mental restoration, a weekly reminder that God is our ultimate provider, not our own productivity or what we do within the world. You see, this is about real provision provided from God, not from your job or your Social Security check. You see, it's about a sacred space to deepen your relationship with God and with other believers. It's a time for humans and animals both to rest, to catch their breath, and not in a human way. See, this isn't like taking a good nap in the afternoon or getting a good night's rest. This blessing is about a true rest, a true recharge, something everyone I know in my life is desperate for, a level of peace. You see, spiritually, it frees you from being a slave to overwork, to societal expectations and this constant need to prove our worth through what we produce. Because see, if we aren't following the Sabbath, then we are following the rigid rules of the world. And I promise you, they will chain you. See, taking a day off for God requires a lot of faith. Jesus clarified that the Sabbath was made to help humanity, not to trap people in a list of strict burdens. See, it's an ideal time for healing, for showing mercy, and for doing good. But see, we can't even apply this if we don't honor it in the first place. Jesus said we do one of two things on the Sabbath. We honor God or we honor the enemy. But we are always honoring something. Remember, I don't write it or command it. I just preach it. I am a teacher of prophecy. And I'll tell you what, I'm not an expert, but I can hold my own pretty good. And I can tell you that the Sabbath very much matters. It matters now, and it will matter later. I'm also a believer who understands what's coming. I'm a woman who loves God and who loves his people, his word. And I implore you this morning, I implore you to get right with this. You see, we will worry and feel shame for the lies that we tell, for the people that we cheat and covet, for our anger and our hatred, for our gossip, for the shows we watch, for the people that we hang out with and engage, for how we honor our parents. We will cringe at someone who kills another, for someone who kills an animal. We are mortified when someone takes the name of God or Jesus in vain. We are sorry for so much. But we don't have any accountability, guilt, or shame that we are smiting a holy day given to us to bless us in a supernatural way, to bless us with prosperity, with true rest, with healing, with supernatural benefits. You see, this is a hard truth, and I encourage you this morning to chew it and to swallow it, because the Sabbath is a gift. I'm going to challenge you this morning. Do you have financial concerns? Do you ever feel like you don't have enough hours in the day? Do you ever feel lost or broken or alone, or like the whole world just works against you all week long? Are you always tired, burning the candle both ends, trying to stretch 5 minutes into an hour? Do you face depression or anxiety? Do you have tough decisions that weigh you down? A week that just never goes right? People that you just can't deal with? Conflicts that you can't avoid? Well, I ask you this morning, what if? What if you trust in God and gave him your obedience? Gave him a day of rest just for him and see what changes? What if you got into alignment with Christ and watched while he worked magic in your life that you don't even know exists? You know, I've said it before and I will say it again. I dare you. Trade your worry. Trade your fear, your rat race, your tired, your I don't know how or why or when or where, your struggle. Trade your lack. Trade everything that you are facing and trade it in for a day off, for peace, for a God-given day off that can make up the slack for every single thing you are trying to get from the world. I dare you. To close this morning, I'm going to read for you Isaiah 58, 13 and 14, which speaks for itself. If you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord. And I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth and feed you with the heritage of Jacob, your father. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. The Sabbath day is an important day, and I hope that you will learn to keep it holy. Amen.